Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." This morning, class, it's my pleasure to introduce General therein McDew, who is selflessly given to our nation. General McDew was commissioned in 1982 following his graduation from Virginia Military Institute. He began his flying career in Loring Air Force Base, Maine. He has served in a number of staff and command assignments and has deployed in support of operations in Central and Southwest Asia. Prior to his current assignment, General McDew was the commander of Air Mobility, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, a command pilot with more than 3,300 flight hours. General McDew is currently serving as the commander of U.S. Transportation Command, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, which is the single manager for global air, land, and sea transportation for the Department of Defense. But on a personal note, what is most impressive about General McDew, to me, is his seamless ability to balance faith, family, and career. So class of CY17, will you stand with me to welcome to the stage a highly regarded Air Force leader and officer, General therein McDew.
Thanks. Take your seats, please. So it is always humbling to get introduced by him. He's done it a couple times. One, because you heard him. Did you hear that voice? So that's exactly how I sound in my dreams. I mean, I sound just like that. And then I wake up. The other thing is, I met his father when his father was a major. His father used to work for me. Yeah. His father's retired now. His father, when I was a wing commander, his dad was the deputy in the civil engineering squadron. That's painful. That really is painful. When a major walks up to you and said, "My dad used to work for you." And then he worked for me too. So I am excited to be here other than that walk back down memory lane. Let me do a couple things. One, let me apologize that this is not a formal presentation. This is not a speech. This is not a lecture. This is a conversation. What I hope is at the end of the conversation, we'll have a chance to have a dialogue. That is the most valuable part of this for me. If we don't have that part, I've wasted your time, and maybe you've wasted mine. Well, no, really, you will have wasted my time. Because I don't come out here just to blather at you. I really do want to get a dialogue going with you. And there's so many important things across our nation, the joint force, the world that we can talk about. So really start getting your questions ready. I do have a 3-question rule. I'm allowed to have rules. I'm a 4-star. I'm a commander. I got rules. The 3-question rule is this: I'll get 3 questions or we won't leave. It's a pretty simple rule. I will grade the questions to make sure that I don't get silly questions like, "Sir, what's your favorite color?" There are no dumb questions. You can ask anything across any spectrum, both personal and professional, that you like. If you're bold enough to ask it, I will answer it. If there's something I can't tell you, I will tell you that, but I will not lie to you or sugarcoat anything. I will tell you what I think. Fair enough? And for those of you that sometimes don't believe me about the 3-question rule, I am an old man, but my bladder is empty. So I can stand up here all day. And I do have the beverage of my choice. Let me begin with this slide here and why this slide is so important to me, especially in this audience. Primarily, there's 3 reasons I use this slide. You can tell that this is not a current picture of me. Right? This picture was taken a few years ago. Maybe good at it. Let him have a little leeway. We got there eventually, and we were fine. But that's an important time in my life. The other is I was a squadron commander. And those of you in the audience should be aspiring to being commanders. You shouldn't aspire to being a general officer. You shouldn't aspire to being a 4-star, but you should aspire to being commanders because that's what we pay you for. That's the only reason we gave you a commission to one day lead service members, and that's why we're here. So it takes me back to those days when not only was I a commander, but I knew every single human being in my squadron by name. It was a small squadron, about 170, and I could tell you every single person's name. I could match all the right spouses to the right military member. That took work. I'm an introvert. That took a lot of work. I could get most of the right kids to the right family. We had 1.5 gazillion children in the squadron. So that was a little bit more difficult, but I could match up the right little Johnny with the right Betty and Sue, that kind of thing. So that was pretty good. But really, the most important reason that I still use this picture, bar none, is that I looked good in that picture. Next slide, please. I begin every presentation with this, after the picture, of course. And the reason I do, and I get the same look that I'm getting from a few of you right now, is why is he thanking us right now? And my thank you is this way. What I have found over the years of my commands, and in my time before I was a commander, you can't overthank the people who are doing the work every single day. You can't find a way to overthank the people who have decided to serve something greater than themselves. People talk a good game about thanking people. They fall far short of actually doing it. So as a reminder to me, it's in every one of my presentations so that I don't forget. Now, those of you that are introverts and may forget certain things you want to say, put it in your presentation to force you to do it. So as a commander, I never stood up in front of my people without saying thank you first. And there's always something to thank someone for. I don't know you, but I can thank you for being here. I don't know you, but I can thank you for continuing to serve. I don't know you, but I can thank you for the things you're about to do in the years coming forward, right? I don't know you, but I can tell you this, it's going to get harder tomorrow than it is today. And I ought to at least thank you and your family for doing what you do. And that's with all the sincerity that I can muster. And here's where I pause for effect, and I make eye contact with as many of you as I can. Thanks. Next slide. All right, let me do a little paid political announcements and advertising. Every place I go, most people, particularly operators, in all the services, believe that they understand the United States Transportation Command. Everybody thinks they can do our job. You're all wrong. I live in the cornfields of Illinois. There are 140,000 people in our enterprise. We have 4 components. Some of you did not know that part. And I believe I lead the best combatant command in the world. Now that sounds kind of braggadocious, doesn't it? It sounds like a pretty bold statement. Now here's why I can say that. Because we get thanked by all the others. Every time I get together with my fellow combatant commanders, they thank me for what our enterprise does. That's pretty powerful. I also appreciate the fact that in my unit climate assessments, I've got a bunch of people that fully appreciate what they do, enjoy what they do, although they realize they will never get credit for what they do. They won't show up in the history books. They won't show up on the news. As a matter of fact, not too long ago, UCOM, and I saw it on CNN myself, they said European Command successfully evacuated all dependents from Turkey. They used their C-17s. They went into Incirlik and they pulled out all the dependents and all the pets, family members out of Incirlik, Turkey. How many C-17s does UCOM have? But in the cornfields of Illinois, we're okay. Recently, 100 bad guys in Libya were killed, right? And we talked a lot about the 30-hour B-2 mission that got them there. Of course, they levitated and got to Libya, dropped their bombs, and levitated their way back over 30 hours. And, I guess generated gas en route. But we're okay. I also am quite pleased when the other combatant commands talk about the vastness of their empires. I find it actually adorable when PACOM tells me how many... That made me stop. Believe me when I tell you, those of us at USTRANSCOM are here for one reason. And now let me show you something, and I know it doesn't pump you up, but it gets me going every single time. I find that kind of stuff quite sexy, actually. Those of you that didn't know, we do have 4 components. We've got an air component you're familiar with, Air Mobility Command. There's an Army component, Surface Distribution Deployment Command. There's a Sea-Lift component, a Navy component, which is the Military Sea-Lift Command. Anybody know what the 4th component of our TRANSCOM is? Yeah, it's actually commercial industry. It's both commercial, air, land, and sea. A big portion of what we do comes through commercial industry. That's why, when I get to talking cyber a little bit later, why it concerns me when somebody has a computer outage in an aircraft company. Most people think that that's a commercial problem. Oh, no, it could be your problem if we need to deploy right now. So you saw in that video a couple things. One, I talk about an immediate force. We underpin this nation's military power. And what we don't do is move stuff. That's elementary. And sometimes logisticians, transporters get wrapped around the axle about moving stuff. We provide options. Our job is to provide you options. And that immediate force says that anytime we choose, right now, we can range the globe and get stuff there. That decisive force, though, it's a maritime force. That gets all this massive military might anywhere on the planet to rain lead down on somebody's head. That's the difference between us and every other military in the world. We may have our challenges, we may have our problems, but I guarantee you no adversary should try us right now. We still have stuff to work on. We're still the best military in the world. And I'm proud that in the cornfields of Illinois, we underpin that power. That's what that's all about. That's why it kind of gets me pumped up. That's why I still get excited about it. I love the Army transporter saying, nothing happens until something moves. And that's what TRANSCOM's all about. Next slide. You are familiar with this map? Because as I look around this room, this has been basically your entire career. You have spent your entire lives focused right here. You now have the distinction of having fought in the longest war in our nation's history. You now have the distinction of being the most battle-tested, battle-hardened, decisive military force we've ever had. But, what does it mean? It's okay when we're fighting folks like this, folks that have given us challenges, but we have had the decisive advantage and we have had domain dominance over these folks. And they've not been that easy to get rid of with domain dominance. What happens when we have the force that can match us with technology? What happens when we have someone that might be able to get advanced past us in some things, and numbers especially? What happens then? What will take us to the next place? Well, that's what we've got to decide on as a country. And I'll tell you right now that our chairman is the right chairman for the right time. Our vice chairman is the right person. And have any of you seen the National Military Strategy? Don't out yourself. It's a classified document. It's signed. It's out on the street. It is what we should be doing. It's the way we should be thinking. It acknowledges that anything that we face in the future is going to be trans-regional, multi-domain. And we can't have the geo-fences that we have around COCOMs anymore. Unless we can get the adversary to stop at the geo-fence and stop fighting, that would be nice. Otherwise, we need to think differently. If we have a problem in, let's say, I use Russia, but I'm not so sure that's appropriate anymore. If we have a problem in Russia, let's say, if they decide to do something strange, EUCOM is obviously the lead combatant command. But do you think all of the rest of the combatant commands will not be affected? Instantly, PACOM has to start thinking about something, right? You would imagine that NORTHCOM's systems have to come up a little bit higher. That means STRATCOM is probably thinking about what might be coming next. TRANSCOM's involved, CyberCom's involved, SOCOM's involved. If we're not involved, we've got a problem. No adversary going forward is going to stop and say, okay, I'm only fighting EUCOM right now. I'm not going to use cyber or special operations. I'm not going to mess with the homeland. So we've got to stop thinking as though we're organized and equipped. Everything is set up geographically. I'd like to remind my peers that they are geographic combatant commands, GCCs as we like to abbreviate. I'm a GCC too. It's called Global. STRATCOM's a GCC. SOCOM's a GCC. Now the chairman has all of us starting to think that way. Are we completely successful yet? No. Because why? Because if you're a geographic, if you want to start thinking transregionally, you may think you may lose something. That's what's gotten into this problem in the first place. And it's the staffs that are worse. So I'm trying to convince some of you to stop peeing on your boss's legs when you're out on the staff about what you need to own in your GCC, because it may not be the most beneficial way to fight. We've had uncontested access. We've had everything we think we've ever wanted in the past. Now, you see that picture? About 150 years ago, as a way of thinking about things differently, and I'm going to use this analogy. I flew the KC-135A model. Yeah, I'm that old. Those little bitty engines were actually they were weak. But 8,000 pounds of thrust in an engine. But when I sat down in that airplane for the first time in the right seat, they taught me to do this. Anybody have an idea what that is? What did I just do? So I sat down, I put my headset on, and then I uncovered my left ear. Why did I uncover my left ear? Because the pilot in the other seat did this and uncovered his right ear. Why? So that we could talk across cockpit at each other. That seemed appropriate in the KC-135A model. Because you didn't want to step on anybody's transmissions, you didn't want to do anything that would disrupt crew resource management, so that was an effective way of communicating in the airplane when you had the navigator and a boom operator that needed the radios. I flew that airplane for a number of years, and I went away and then flew about 7 or 8 different airplanes, but came back to the 135 as a 3-star as 18th Air Force Commander. And I got back in the airplane, and since that time, I had flown the 141, the C-17, the C-130, the C-9, the C-21, UH-1 helicopters. I come back to the airplane. And I sit down in the left seat now, getting checked out. I'd been a schoolhouse instructor, that's what that picture is. And I went like this. And I reached over to the panel, and I flipped on a thing called Hot Mic. Hot Mic allows you to be voice-activated communication. And I didn't do this. Didn't think anything of it. Flying around the pattern, I'm having flashbacks. I'm having all kinds of muscle memories. And I'm flying the airplane pretty well, as far as I'm concerned. And my instructor is not necessarily agreeing with me, but that's a different point. But I noticed about the second or third pattern when I'm showing him some things that they'd stopped teaching in the airplane, that he's giving me stink eye. You guys know what stink eye is, right? And so after one pattern or 2 patterns, I noticed he's giving me a little stink eye, and I finally can't stand it anymore. I said, "Captain, why are you giving me stink eye?" He goes, "Sir, I'm not giving you stink eye." I said, "Captain, I've been around a long time. I recognize stink eye when I see it, and that's stink eye." He goes, "Sir, well, really, it's because you sat down and you did this, and you did not do this." I said, "You're kidding me. You guys still do this?" He goes, "Absolutely." As a matter of fact, sir, if you were one of my students, and you are, I would have to downgrade this ride because you didn't do this. I said, "Captain, can you tell me why you do this?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, Captain, it's a very simple reason. Back in the KC-135A model, the radios, the technical part now, sucked. And so we had to do that to get communications to be effective. Why do you do it now?" So this is not a conversation about radios. How many things are you perpetuating that don't add value today? How many things are you teaching that you have no business teaching or don't know the foundation of them, and your students are looking at it like you're absolutely nuts, or the people you lead, because it doesn't add value, and they're doing it just because you told them to? We're our own worst enemy. 15 years of war. There's some positive things to carry forward and some things we ought to drop. And we're our own worst enemy. And the worst thing I can do for you is to tell you that you did something well, because then you'll just polish it. It could be something you thought was stupid 5 minutes before, but if I give you a coin and maybe a certificate, it becomes your stupid thing. And then you're the captain or major of this stupid thing, and you're going to make it the best darn stupid thing you've ever seen. And if the IG gives you a best practice, well, heaven forbid you see anybody try to make you change it. You'll make other people around the Air Force or the military do the same stupid thing you're doing, because you've been awarded for it, even though you recognized before you took over it that it was stupid. Our own worst enemies. And many times you have the power to change it yourself. That story is one that I tell every place I go for that simple reason, is that the adversary needs us. We need to be different. And we know it. But we look to someone else to do it. That global nature of war is something that we're going to talk about forever and ever. Amen. But cyber is the bigger issue for us, for me. If you look inside my my organization, we have to work 90% of what we do on the commercial.com or networks because we have to deal with that commercial industry. Because about half of our business in the commercial side, both sea, land, surface, and air. So it's a big deal. And what are we going to do about it? And I talked to you about Delta's, United's problems in cyber. Well, I'm sorry, they said, each of them said it was a mechanical issue. I don't know if I buy it. Because what would make them tell us otherwise? Not much, actually. On that side, I'm looking at DHS, because Homeland Security is in charge through the FBI of looking at the .com side today. And they don't have the same lens I have about my fourth component, what underpins your ability to go to war. And that's a problem that we've got to really, really look at. Because if every COCOM goes out there and goes into a cloak-filled room and comes up with this wonderful top-secret plan, what's the first thing they do with it? They give it to me. And what's the first thing I do with it? I give it to the commercial industry to execute it. So how long will it stay top secret? We've got to find a way to do something different about our sharing and the way we secure information. And we're looking at some ways that we can possibly get after that as well. One of the other things that when I was a youngster, a bunch of us would run around talking about, I want to grow up to be a pilot one day. I want to grow up to drive ships one day. One of my cousins wanted to be a long-haul truck driver. Well, if you look at these statistics, where are those young people today? We are actually short in every one of those areas. We're not producing people that want to do this work. Now, it's not that the jobs aren't there. Nobody wants to do them. Autonomy is going to get us somewhere. Recently, Uber, who wants to conquer the world, by the way, you think they just want to take you from one bar to the next. What they really want to do is they want to make my grandson never drive a car. We had them on a panel at our National Defense Transportation Association, and they gave us a broader vision of where they're headed. And they don't want you to own a car, ever. So they recently had partnered with Bush, Anheuser-Busch, and they drove, I can't remember how many cans of Bud, from Denver to Colorado Springs. They had a driver in the truck, take it out of the lot, loading dock, got it on the highway, got out of the seat. And down the road it went from Denver to Colorado Springs with the guy reading a newspaper. He gets itself off the highway, he jumps back in and takes it into the lot, the loading dock, to unload it. They're not far away from being able to do the rest of it, but right now Uber has already figured that part out. That will help us long term, but what's going to be in the short term? We've got to be a little bit more innovative about that. And so that's one of the things we're talking about. Let me read you some things very quickly about that should sound familiar. The American public is tired and eager to move on after recent wars and is weary of engaging in another conflict around the world. Our peer nations are on the rise and their capabilities are growing. Our military is not large enough nor properly equipped to meet the modern enemy. Our current technology and tactics are focused on winning the last war, not the next one. A senior military leader goes in front of a committee on the Hill and says, I hope you'll agree with me when I say that further reductions in this bill will seriously endanger the national defense. Headlines read, people demand peace. All except that headline could actually the headline could be, we don't use graphics like that all that much anymore. That was 75 years ago. It could be yesterday or today. So what happened back then that we might be able to learn from? One of the things, that was General George Cadleck Marshall. Hopefully you've heard of him. VMI class of 1901. Just saying. I told that to the Army guys. I love telling that to the Army guys. What he did was concentrate on what he could control versus the things he couldn't control. What he could do, not necessarily on the things he couldn't do. And then he got after the Louisiana maneuvers. Made the most realistic exercises that we had done to date to get after those things we needed to wring out, to know where we needed to expand, where we needed to contract, where we needed to reorganize. He also started to look after who was going to be his next set of leaders. These are during the interwar years. And I don't know if we're in those right now, but those interwar years turned out to be quite prophetic for him. And by the time World War II happened, he had figured out who those next leaders were. Well, I think we're in a place right now, at that crossroads today. What are we going to do? Where are we headed? What's going to be the result? Who will lead us through this? Well, I believe that the next Nimitz, the next Arnold, the next Marshall is in this room. I think you are the answer. I'm convinced of it. The problem is, you're not. Some of you are thinking differently. Some of you are starting to challenge the status quo. But not enough of you are forcing the fix. And we can talk about how you get after that. About 200 years ago, when I was a young cadet at the Virginia Military Institute, I walked through this archway thousands of times. And the inscription says, "You may be whatever you resolve to be." We thought so highly of it that we have it on the side of our class rings. And it's a constant reminder to me that it's a choice. It's a choice to be a better leader. It's a choice to be a change agent. It's a choice to risk to make things different, because it is a risk. It's not a great risk, but it's a risk. It's a risk that something could happen to you, that your career could be curtailed. I find it odd that someone would say in one hand, we shouldn't be careerists, but they fear doing anything that risks their career. They look at that guy and that girl and they said, they're doing that only to further their career. What are the things you're not doing that you fear will change your career? Easy for me to say. You say you've never taken a risk, 4-star. Really? We can talk about that too. But I know, you have the answers. And I've been going around our joint force trying to convince you that you do have the answers. Do it. When you leave here, most of you will go into some command. You will have some job description. You will be given broader latitudes than you've ever been given in your entire career. And that's what we want. Don't apologize. Don't ask permission to do your job. Get after it. Do all those things that you know ought to be done, and lead your people and role model for them a different way. You can choose to become a blog writer, be an internet troll, and find ways to denigrate all the people who are taking a risk, or you can be the risk taker and let people write about you. It ain't fun, but it's a long-term more rewarding. Next slide. You got to have a good dead guy quote. I love this particular dead guy. I think it's a guy. I think he's dead. But unless you care a whole awful lot, things aren't going to get better. And that's a pronoun issue. You care. It's not the Air Force or the Marine Corps. It's yours. As much of it as you want to take. Once you take ownership of it, you start changing your portion of the world, in my humble opinion. Next slide. I hopefully end about the way I started. No, not yet. And then I take questions first. Oh yeah, I take questions first. I'm looking at her. She's telling me what I'm supposed to be doing next. She just found out this morning she's on her way to command in the Army. We don't know where she's going yet. She will go and she will be good, or I will hunt her down and kill her. I've told all my aides that because I let them into the window of how I operate, and they will have seen every mistake that can be made. They shouldn't make those. I said, be bold enough to make your own. Don't make the stupid ones that I've made. All right, what are your questions? I'm ready. I've got chocolate and I got a Diet Coke. Not you.